keys hung in the air for what felt like forever. Malcolm didn't catch them. He didn't need to. He let them drop slow, deliberate, right into the palm of his calloused hand. The same hand that had scrubbed these marble floors for 18 months. The same hand that had been slapped away from the very car now gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the executive parking garage. "That's actually mine," Malcolm said. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just existed steady, quiet, absolute. Manager Steve Calloway stood frozen, his face drained of color, his mouth half open like a fish gulping for air. Around them, a small crowd had gathered. Security guards, administrative assistants, a few junior analysts who'd come down for their lunch break. They'd all heard the yelling. They'd all seen Steve grab Malcolm by the wrist, yanking him away from the midnight blue Aston Martin like he was some kind of threat. "You don't touch the CEO's car," Steve had barked, spit flying. "You don't even look at it. You're a janitor. Know your place." And now Malcolm was holding the keys. "If you think you know where this is going, stay with me, because what comes next will shatter every assumption you've ever made about power, dignity, and what it means to rise when the world keeps shoving you down." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that really?" Steve's hands trembled. That's impossible." "You're a janitor?" Malcolm finished, his eyes locking onto Steve's. "Yeah, I was." He clicked the fob. The Aston Martin's lights blinked twice, its engine purring to life like a beast waking from a nap. Steve stumbled backward. Malcolm stepped forward. "And if you're wondering how a man scrubbing toilets ends up owning the company, stick around. Because this story doesn't start with glory. It starts with shame, survival, and a single decision that changed everything." Malcolm Turner had always been good at being invisible. It was a skill he'd learned young, growing up in Southeast DC, where being seen often meant being targeted. Keep your head down. Don't make noise. Survive first. Dream later. By the time he was 32, invisibility had become his armor. He moved through Arcadia Corp's glass towers like a ghost, mopping floors at 6 a.m. before the executives arrived, emptying trash bins while they debated million-dollar deals. No one knew his name. Not really. He was the janitor, the cleaning guy. "Hey, you." And Malcolm was fine with that, because while they ignored him, he was watching, learning, absorbing. Arcadia Corp wasn't just any company. It was a titan in the tech world, a $15 billion empire built on cloud infrastructure and enterprise software. Malcolm had read every article, every earnings report, every leaked memo left carelessly in recycling bins. He knew the company's weaknesses better than most of its board members. He knew which departments were bleeding money, which products were about to fail, which executives were too arrogant to see the cliff they were driving toward. And he knew that Arcadia's founder and CEO, Richard Langford, was dying. Not publicly, not yet. But Malcolm had seen the pill bottles in Langford's private bathroom. He'd overheard the hushed phone calls about experimental treatments. He'd watched the man's hands shake during late-night meetings, his once sharp mind struggling to hold on to threads of conversation. Langford had no heir, no succession plan. The board was fractured, each member positioning themselves for a power grab. Arcadia was an empire without a king, and the vultures were circling. Malcolm had a plan. He'd been building it for months, quietly, in the margins of his life. He'd saved every dollar he earned, lived in a studio apartment with peeling paint, ate ramen 6 nights a week. He'd taught himself coding in the evenings, built apps that never saw the light of day, studied business strategy like his life depended on it, because it did. He didn't want to scrub floors forever. He didn't want to be invisible forever. But he also knew the world didn't hand opportunities to men who looked like him. So he'd learned to create his own. The car was the first piece. The Aston Martin DB11. Langford's pride and joy. Malcolm had saved for 2 years to buy it at auction when Langford's estate quietly liquidated assets to cover medical bills. It wasn't about flexing. It was about positioning, about making a statement when the time was right. Today was that day. Steve Calloway had been a thorn in Malcolm's side for months. Middle management with a god complex, the kind of guy who got off on humiliating people he thought were beneath him. He berated Malcolm in front of clients, mocked his accent, once even accidentally knocked over a bucket of mop water onto Malcolm's shoes. Malcolm had taken it all in silence. Until today. He'd parked the Aston Martin in Langford's spot deliberately. He knew Steve would see it, knew he'd react, knew he'd make a scene. Malcolm had been counting on it, because Malcolm wasn't just a janitor anymore. 3 days ago, through a shell company and a series of carefully orchestrated stock purchases, he'd acquired a controlling interest in Arcadia Corp. The board didn't know yet. Langford didn't know yet. But the paperwork was filed, the lawyers were ready, and in 48 hours, the announcement would go live. Malcolm Turner, the invisible man, was about to become the most visible person in the building. But first, he had to survive this moment. Steve's face was cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, rage, disbelief, fear. "This is some kind of joke," he stammered. You can't." "I can," Malcolm said. He pocketed the keys and adjusted the collar of his janitor's uniform, the navy blue fabric suddenly feeling less like a costume and more like a declaration. "And I did." "You stole that car," Steve accused, his voice rising. "I'm calling security." "Go ahead." Malcolm's tone was ice. "Call them. Call the police." "I'll call Mr. Langford himself." "I'll wait." Steve's hand hovered over his phone. The crowd was growing. Someone was filming now, a phone held high, the red recording light blinking like a warning. Malcolm smiled, not a triumphant smile, not cruel, just knowing. He'd learned long ago that power wasn't about yelling the loudest. It was about knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Steve made the call. 5 minutes later, security arrived. 10 minutes after that, Richard Langford himself stepped off the executive elevator, flanked by his assistant and 2 lawyers. Langford looked older than Malcolm remembered. Thinner, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. "What's going on here?" Langford demanded, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on Malcolm. Steve pointed a shaking finger. This janitor claims he owned your car, sir." He's clearly lying, trying to..." "He's not lying," Langford said. The garage fell silent. Langford's eyes met Malcolm's. Recognition flickered there. Not of a janitor, of someone else. Someone Langford had been watching too. "That car," Langford said slowly, "was sold to a private buyer 6 weeks ago. I signed the paperwork myself." Steve's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Langford stepped closer to Malcolm. "I didn't expect to meet you like this, Mr. Turner." The use of his name, his real name, sent a ripple through the crowd. Malcolm extended his hand. "Pleasure to finally meet you in person, Mr. Langford." Langford shook it, firmly, respectfully. "Shall we talk in my office?" Langford asked. Malcolm nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked toward the elevator, Steve stood rooted to the spot, his world crumbling around him. Malcolm didn't look back. He didn't need to. The invisible man had just become unforgettable. Richard Langford's office was everything Malcolm expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather furniture that probably cost more than Malcolm's car, abstract art that screamed, "I have money and taste." But what surprised him was the chessboard sitting on the coffee table between 2 armchairs. Langford gestured to one of the chairs. "Do you play?" "A bit," Malcolm said, settling into the seat. In truth, he'd been playing online for years, studying grandmasters, memorizing openings. Chess was strategy. chess was patience. Chess was everything Malcolm had built his life around. Langford moved a pawn. E4, the king's pawn opening. Classic, aggressive. Malcolm responded with E5, symmetrical. Waiting. You bought my car, Langford said, moving his knight. You could have bought any car. Why mine? Malcolm moved his own knight. Because it wasn't about the car. Then, what was it about? A message. Langford smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that came from a man who knew his time was running out. And what message is that? That I see you, Malcolm said. That I understand what you built here. And that I'm ready to protect it. Langford's eyes narrowed. From who? From the people who'll tear it apart the moment you're gone. The words hung in the air. Langford didn't flinch, didn't deny. He just moved another piece. You've been doing your homework, Langford said. I've been doing more than that. Malcolm reached into his jacket, still his janitor's jacket, still navy blue, and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table between them. I own 38% of Arcadia Corp as of 3 days ago. Purchased through a series of shell companies, leveraged buyouts, and private stock sales. All legal. All documented. Langford opened the folder. His expression didn't change, but Malcolm saw the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched. You're a janitor, Langford said flatly. I was a janitor, Malcolm corrected. I was also a day trader, a consultant, a freelance developer. I've had 7 jobs in the last 5 years. Mr. Langford. Every single one of them was a stepping stone to this moment. Langford closed the folder. Why Arcadia? Because it's broken, Malcolm said simply, and I know how to fix it. You think you can walk into my company, and just take over? I think, Malcolm said, leaning forward, that you're dying. I think your board is a pack of jackals waiting for you to bleed out so they can fight over the scraps. I think your CFO has been embezzling funds for the last 2 years. I think your head of product development is weeks away from jumping ship to your biggest competitor. I think you know all of this, but you're too proud or too tired to do anything about it. Langford stared at him. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the older man started to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd been waiting for this moment, who'd been hoping someone would finally call him out, finally show up with the guts to say what everyone else was too scared to say. You've got balls, Turner, Langford said, wiping his eyes. I'll give you that. I've got more than that, Malcolm replied. I've got a plan, and I've got the capital to execute it. All I need is your endorsement, and if I don't give it, then I'll fight you. I'll drag this company through a proxy war, burn through your cash reserves, tank your stock price, and force the board to choose between you and me. And Mr. Langford, with all due respect, you're not in fighting shape anymore. Langford's laughter died. He studied Malcolm with new intensity. You'd really do that? I'd rather not, Malcolm admitted. But I didn't come this far to lose because you couldn't let go of your ego. Another long silence. Langford moved his queen. Check. Malcolm moved his bishop. Blocked. What's your plan? Langford asked. Malcolm spent the next 20 minutes laying it out, restructuring the board, cutting dead weight, pivoting the company's focus toward AI integration and cloud security markets. Arcadia had ignored while their competitors ate their lunch. He talked about culture, about building a leadership team that actually reflected the diversity of their customer base, about investing in talent instead of hoarding profits for shareholders. Langford listened. Occasionally he interrupted with a question, a challenge, a devil's advocate argument. But he listened. When Malcolm finished, Langford sat back in his chair. You know what the board will say, that I'm unqualified, that I'm too young, that I don't have an MBA from Harvard or Stanford, that you're black, Langford said bluntly. Malcolm didn't flinch. Yeah, that too. And you think you can handle that? Mr. Langford, Malcolm said, his voice steady. I've been handling that my entire life. This is just a bigger stage. Langford smiled again. This time, it was genuine. You remind me of myself. 30 years ago, when I started this company in my garage, everyone said I'd fail. Everyone said a black man couldn't build a tech empire. I proved them wrong. Then help me do the same, Malcolm said. Langford reached across the table. Checkmate. Malcolm looked down at the board. He'd been so focused on the conversation, he'd missed the trap. Langford's queen and rook had boxed in his king. Game over. Langford extended his hand. I'll endorse you. On one condition. Name it. You don't erase me. You don't pretend I didn't build this. You honor the foundation, even as you rebuild the house. Malcolm shook his hand. Deal. As they stood, Langford placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. One more thing. What's that? Fire Steve Calloway. Today. I don't care if he's been here 10 years. Any man who treats another human being the way he treated you doesn't belong in my company. Or yours, Malcolm grinned. Already on my to-do list. They walked out of the office together. The hallway buzzed with whispers, stares, confusion. Malcolm could feel the weight of every eye on him. The questions, the doubts, the disbelief. But he didn't shrink. He didn't hide. He walked like he owned the place. Because in 48 hours, he would. If you've ever been underestimated, ever been told you didn't belong, drop a comment. Because Malcolm's fight is just beginning. And what happens next will test everything he believes about power, loyalty, and justice. The announcement hit like a bomb. Malcolm Turner, former janitor, was now the majority shareholder and incoming CEO of Arcadia Corp. The press release went live at 9 a.m. on a Thursday. By 9:15, social media was on fire. By 10, every major news outlet had picked up the story. From janitor to CEO, the most unlikely rise in corporate America. Malcolm Turner, the man who cleaned floors before owning the building. Arcadia Corp shakeup. Dying founder hands. Keys to unknown outsider. Malcolm sat in his new office, a temporary space on the executive floor. Smaller than Langford's, but still 3 times the size of his old studio apartment, and watched the chaos unfold. His phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, investors, old classmates he hadn't spoken to in a decade suddenly wanting to catch up. He ignored most of it. But one call, he answered. Malcolm Turner, he said. Is this some kind of publicity stunt? The voice on the other end was sharp, cold. Margaret Chin, Arcadia's CFO. Malcolm had flagged her months ago as one of the embezzlers. She didn't know that yet. Good morning to you too, Miss Chan. Don't play games with me. What the hell is going on? I assume you read the press release. I read a fantasy novel, she snapped. You're a janitor. You can't just... I'm not a janitor anymore, Malcolm interrupted. And unless you want to have a very uncomfortable conversation with the SEC about some creative accounting in Q3, I suggest you show up to the board meeting this afternoon with a better attitude. Silence. Then, quietly, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. 2 p.m. conference room. Don't be late. He hung up before she could respond. The first board meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Langford had arranged it personally, calling each board member to deliver the news and ensure they showed up. Some were intrigued. Some were furious. All of them were coming. Malcolm spent the morning preparing, not with slides or presentations. He didn't need those. He prepared by walking the building, shaking hands with employees, learning names, asking questions. What's your biggest frustration here? If you could change one thing about how we operate, what would it be? Do you feel like leadership listens to you? The answers were consistent. Management was out of touch. Processes were inefficient. People felt undervalued. Malcolm took notes, not on his phone, in a notebook, handwritten, personal. By the time 2 p.m. rolled around, he'd spoken to 43 employees. He knew their stories, their struggles, their dreams, and he was ready. The boardroom was exactly what he expected. Long mahogany table, high-back chairs, portraits of past CEOs lining the walls. 8 board members sat waiting, their expressions ranging from skeptical to hostile. Margaret Chung glared at him from across the table. David Brennan, the head of product development, looked bored. Sandra Liu, the board chairwoman, folded her hands and watched Malcolm with the calculating gaze of a chess player sizing up an opponent. Richard Langford sat at the head of the table. He nodded to Malcolm. "The floor is yours." Malcolm didn't sit. He stood, hands in his pockets, relaxed, confident. "I know what you're thinking," he began. "Who the hell is this guy? Where did he come from? Why should we trust him?" Fair questions. Let me answer them. He walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "My name is Malcolm Turner. I grew up in D.C., where half my friends are dead or in prison. I put myself through community college working 3 jobs. I taught myself to code, to trade stocks, to understand business not from textbooks, but from survival. For the last 18 months, I worked here as a janitor. Not because I couldn't do anything else, but because I wanted to understand this company from the ground up. I wanted to see what you couldn't see, and I wanted to be invisible long enough to position myself for this moment." "That's great," David Brennan interrupted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But vision doesn't pay the bills. What's your actual plan?" Malcolm smiled. "I'm glad you asked, David. Let's start with you." Brennan's smirk faltered. Malcolm pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. 3 weeks ago, you accepted a job offer from Zenith Tech, our biggest competitor. You plan to announce your resignation next month and take half your team with you. You also plan to leak our upcoming product roadmap to give Zenith a head start. The room went silent. Brennan's face drained of color. That's absurd," Brennan stammered. "Is it?" Malcolm opened his own copy of the folder. "Because I have emails, signed NDAs with Zenith's recruiting team. A wire transfer from Zenith to your offshore account. Should I keep going?" Brennan stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. Sit down," Sandra Liu commanded. Her voice was steel. Brennan sat. Malcolm turned to Margaret Chung. "Your turn, Margaret." She didn't flinch. "I have no idea what you're implying." "Then let me be clear." Malcolm slid another folder across the table. "For the last 2 years, you've been funneling company funds into shell companies you control. Small amounts. A few thousand here, a few thousand there, totaling about $800,000. You thought you were clever. You weren't." Margaret's jaw tightened. "You have no proof. I have forensic accountants who would disagree. I also have a choice for you. Resign quietly, return the money, and I won't press charges. Or fight me and spend the next 5 years in court and possibly prison." Margaret stared at him. Then, slowly, she stood. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk by end of day." She walked out without another word. Malcolm looked around the table. "Anyone else want to test me?" No one spoke. He sat down. "Good. Now let's talk about how we're going to save this company." For the next hour, Malcolm laid out his vision. Aggressive expansion into AI, restructuring middle management, investing in employee development, building partnerships with HBCUs to recruit diverse talent, cutting executive bonuses and redirecting that capital into R&D. Some board members pushed back. Malcolm answered every objection with data, with logic, with unshakable calm. By the end of the meeting, even Sandra Liu was nodding. As the board filed out, Langford approached Malcolm. "You handled that well. Thanks, but you made enemies today?" Be careful. Malcolm met his eyes. I've been making enemies my whole life, Mr. Langford. I'm still here. Langford clapped him on the shoulder. Good, because the hard part hasn't even started yet. Malcolm moved into his permanent office 3 days later. It was surreal. Surreal. The same building where he'd mopped floors now belonged to him. At least the top floor did. His name was on the door. Not Janitor. Not Malcolm Turner, assistant manager. Just Malcolm Turner, CEO. He stood at the window, looking out over the city. From here, everything looked small, manageable. But Malcolm knew better. The real work was just beginning. His first week was a blur. Press interviews, investor calls, meetings with department heads. Everyone wanted a piece of him, wanted to know his story, wanted to see if he was the real deal or just a fluke. He gave them nothing. No tearjerker interviews about his rough childhood. No inspirational speeches about bootstraps and hard work. He simply worked. He fired 17 people in the first week. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Dead weight. People who'd been coasting for years, collecting paychecks without contributing. Malcolm replaced them with hungry, talented individuals, many of them from backgrounds like his. He also promoted 32 people, assistants to managers, analysts to directors. He looked for competence, for drive, for the kind of hunger he recognized in himself. And he reinstated the janitorial staff's benefits package, which had been quietly cut 2 years ago. That last move made headlines. New CEO's first act, helping the people he used to work with. Malcolm didn't do it for the headlines. He did it because he remembered what it felt like to worry about rent, to skip doctor's appointments because he couldn't afford to copay, to wonder if he'd ever have anything more than survival. But the media loved this story. Malcolm Turner, the billionaire janitor, the underdog CEO, the man who proved anyone could make it. Except Malcolm knew the truth. Not anyone could make it. He'd gotten lucky. He'd made smart moves, yes. Worked hard, absolutely. But he'd also been in the right place at the right time, with the right set of skills and the right amount of desperation. And now that he'd made it, the weight of that luck was crushing. Because every time he walked past a janitor in the hallway, he saw himself. Every time an employee thanked him for a promotion, he wondered if he was doing enough. Every time he looked at the company's financials, $15 billion in revenue, 70,000 employees worldwide, he felt the enormity of the responsibility. One wrong move and thousands of people lost their jobs. One bad quarter and investors pulled their funding. One scandal and everything he'd built would crumble. He didn't sleep much those first few weeks. Late one night, he was still in his office when his assistant, a sharp woman named Kaisha, who'd been promoted from HR, knocked on his door. "You should go home," she said. "I will. That's what you said 3 hours ago." Malcolm smiled tiredly. "You're still here too. Because you're still here." She crossed her arms. "Malcolm, you can't do everything yourself. I'm not trying to." "Yes, you are. You're in every meeting, reviewing every decision, micromanaging every department. You're going to burn out. I can't afford to burn out. You can't afford not to." Kaisha sat down across from him. "You know what the staff is saying? They're saying you're amazing. They're saying you're transforming this place. But they're also saying you look exhausted. And if you collapse, all of this collapses with you." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "What do you suggest?" "Delegate, trust your team. You hired good people, let them do their jobs. And if they screw up, then you fix it. But you can't prevent every mistake by working yourself to death." She was right. Malcolm knew she was right, but letting go felt impossible. He'd spent his entire life in control, planning every move, trusting no one. "I'll try," he said finally. Kaisha stood. "Good. Now go home. Get some sleep. The company will still be here tomorrow." Malcolm did go home. didn't sleep. He sat on his couch, the same lumpy couch from his old studio, because he hadn't bothered upgrading yet, and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. She died when he was 19, worn out by a life of struggle. He wondered what she'd think of him now, if she'd be proud, or if she'd tell him he was being an idiot, working himself into an early grave just like she had. He thought about the kids in his old neighborhood, the ones who didn't make it out, the ones who were just as smart, just as talented, but didn't get the breaks he got. And he thought about the employees at Arcadia, the janitors, the assistants, the warehouse workers, the people whose names didn't make headlines, whose work was invisible, but whose labor kept the entire machine running. Malcolm made a decision that night. He couldn't save everyone. He couldn't fix every injustice, but he could build something better. A company that didn't just extract value from its workers, but invested in them. A company that proved capitalism didn't have to be exploitative. It was ambitious, maybe naive. But Malcolm had never been good at thinking small. The next morning, he called a company-wide meeting. All 70,000 employees, via live stream. He stood in front of the camera, no script, no teleprompter, just him. "My name is Malcolm Turner," he began. "A lot of you know my story by now. But here's what you don't know. I'm terrified." He let that sit for a moment. "I'm terrified of failing you, of letting you down, of proving everyone right who said I don't belong here. But I'm more afraid of not trying. So here's my promise. I will work every day to make this company a place you're proud to work for. I will listen to you. I will value you. And I will fight like hell to make sure your work is respected and rewarded." He paused. "But I can't do it alone. I need you. All of you. This isn't my company. It's ours. And together, we're going to build something that lasts." The live stream ended. Malcolm didn't know if it was the right thing to say. Didn't know if people would believe him. But 2 hours later, Kaisha walked into his office with tears in her eyes. "People are flooding HR with messages," she said. "They're saying they've never felt more motivated. They're saying you're the leader they've been waiting for." Malcolm exhaled. Maybe, just maybe, he was doing something right. Have you ever felt the weight of responsibility crushing you like one wrong move could ruin everything? Malcolm's learning that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being human. Drop a comment if you've ever struggled with that balance. Success has a way of digging up the past. Malcolm had been CEO for 3 months when the email arrived. No subject line. Just an address he hadn't seen in over a decade. "It's me. We need to talk." Jay Jamal, his best friend from childhood. The one who'd taken a different path. The one Malcolm had left behind. Malcolm stared at the email for a long time. His finger hovered over the delete button, but he couldn't do it. Not yet. Jamal had been there when Malcolm's mom died, and slept on Malcolm's couch when his own family kicked him out. They dreamed together, planned together, survived together, and then Malcolm had gotten out. It wasn't dramatic, no big fight, just distance. Malcolm went to community college. Jamal stayed in the neighborhood. Malcolm got a job. Jamal got involved with people Malcolm knew were dangerous. They stopped calling, stopped texting. Life moved on. Now, 13 years later, Jamal wanted to talk. Malcolm typed a response before he could overthink it. "Coffee. Saturday. You picked the place." The reply came instantly. "Lou's Diner. Tana Mung's Diner." God, Malcolm hadn't been there in years. It was a hole-in-the-wall spot near their old neighborhood, greasy food and questionable coffee, but it had been their refuge as kids. Saturday morning, Malcolm drove himself. No driver. No security. Just him and his Aston Martin, Pulling up to a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since 1987, Jamal was already there, sitting in a booth by the window. He looked older, harder. Prison had a way of aging people. Because yeah, Malcolm knew. He'd kept tabs. Jamal had done 5 years for armed robbery. Got out 2 years ago. Been clean since, working construction, trying to rebuild. Malcolm slid into the booth. Hey. Jamal's voice was rough. Nice ride. Thanks. They ordered coffee. The silence was thick, heavy with years of unspoken words. Finally, Jamal spoke. I saw you on the news. Big-time CEO now. Yeah, guess you made it. Malcolm met his eyes. I got lucky. Jamal laughed bitterly. Luck, right. That's what you call busting your ass while the rest of us were just, what? Lazy? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Jamal leaned forward. Because I worked hard too, Malcolm. I hustled. I did what I had to do to survive. Difference is, I didn't have your options. Malcolm wanted to argue. Wanted to defend himself. But he couldn't. Because Jamal was right. They'd started from the same place. Same neighborhood. Same broken schools. Same lack of resources. But Malcolm had gotten a scholarship to community college. Jamal hadn't. Malcolm had landed a mentor who taught him to code. Jamal had landed in a crew that taught him to boost cars. The difference between success and prison had been razor thin. And Malcolm knew it. You're right, Malcolm said quietly. I had breaks you didn't. Jamal blinked, surprised. But I'm here now, Malcolm continued, and I want to help. If you'll let me. Jamal's jaw tightened. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's opportunity. Malcolm pulled out a business card. I'm starting a new initiative. Hiring people with records. Giving them real jobs, real training, real futures. I want you to run it. Jamal stared at the card. You're serious. Dead serious. You know what it's like. You know the system. You know how to survive. That's exactly what I need. Why? Because I can't do this alone. And because I owe you. Jamal's eyes glistened. He looked away quickly, blinking. You don't owe me anything. Yeah, I do. You were there when my mom died. You kept me sane. You kept me alive. I should have been there for you. I wasn't. Let me make it right. Jamal was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up the card. I'll think about it. Malcolm nodded. That's all I ask. They talked for another hour. About old times. About mistakes. About grief and guilt and what it meant to survive when so many didn't. When Malcolm left, he felt lighter. Not absolved. Not forgiven. But hopeful. He drove back to the office with Jamal's face still in his mind. And he thought about all the Jamals out there. All the people who'd been one bad decision, one unlucky break, one systemic failure away from a different life. He couldn't save them all, but he could start. That week, Malcolm announced the Second Chance Initiative. The announcement came during Arcadia's quarterly earnings call. Investors expected the usual dog and pony show revenue projections, profit margins, strategic pivots. What they got instead was Malcolm Turner standing in front of a camera. No suit, just a black turtleneck and jeans, speaking directly to the lens. Today, I'm announcing the Second Chance Initiative, Malcolm began. Arcadia Corp will invest $50 million over the next 3 years to hire, train, and support formerly incarcerated individuals. We'll partner with reentry programs, offer paid apprenticeships, and create pathways to full-time employment across every level of our organization. He paused, letting it sink in. Some of you are already composing angry emails. You're worried about risk, about liability, about what this means for shareholder value. I get it. But here's what I know. We waste billions of dollars every year locking people up and then refusing to let them work when they get out. We create a cycle of poverty and desperation. And then we act surprised when people fall back into crime. That's not just morally bankrupt, it's economically stupid. The camera cut to the investors' faces. Some looked intrigued. Others looked ready to bolt. Malcolm continued, "This isn't charity. It's smart business. We're tapping into an underutilized labor pool, people who are hungry, motivated, and loyal because someone finally gave them a shot. We're building community goodwill. And we're proving that a company can be profitable and ethical. If you can't get behind that, feel free to sell your shares. We'll be just fine." The call ended. Within minutes, the reactions poured in. Progressive outlets praised him. Malcolm Turner proves corporate America can have a conscience. Conservative pundits slammed him. Woke CEO puts criminals before shareholders. Social media exploded. Hashtag Second Chance Initiative trended for 3 days. Some people called Malcolm a hero. Others called him reckless, dangerous, naive. Malcolm ignored all of it. He had work to do. Jamal accepted the job 2 days after the announcement. He walked into Malcolm's office wearing the same worn jacket he'd had at the diner. Eyes sharp, posture guarded. "I'm in," Jamal said. "But I have conditions." Malcolm leaned back. "Let's hear them. 1. I'm not a token. I'm not here to make you look good. If this program is bullshit, I walk. Fair. 2. I hire who I want. No vetting based on optics. If someone's qualified and committed, they're in. Agreed. 3. You give me real authority. I'm not just some figurehead. I make decisions. I control the budget. I report directly to you." Malcolm stood and extended his hand. "Deal? Anything else?" Jamal hesitated. "Yeah. Why me?" "You could have hired some hotshot consultant, someone with an MBA and a TED Talk. Why give this to a dude who spent 5 years in prison?" "Because," Malcolm said, gripping Jamal's hand, "I don't need someone who studied poverty. I need someone who lived it. I need someone who knows what it's like to be written off, counted out, and left for dead. That's you. That's always been you." Jamal's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Let's get to work." Over the next 6 weeks, Jamal built something remarkable. He partnered with re-entry organizations across the country, identifying candidates who were serious about change. He designed a 6-month training program coding boot camps, project management workshops, vocational training. He hired social workers to help with housing, childcare, transportation, the invisible barriers that kept people from succeeding even when they got opportunities. And he didn't sugarcoat the challenges. In meetings with department heads, Jamal was blunt. "These folks have trauma," he told a skeptical VP of operations. "They've been through hell. Some of them will struggle. Some will relapse. Some will quit. But most won't. Most will bust their asses because they know this is their last shot. And if you give them structure, support, and respect, they'll outwork half the people you already have." The VP wasn't convinced. "And what happens when one of them screws up? When they steal something or hurt someone then we deal with it." Jamal interrupted. "Same way you deal with any employee who screws up. You don't blame their whole community. You don't shut down the program. You hold individuals accountable and keep moving forward." Malcolm watched these conversations from the sidelines, stepping in only when necessary. Jamal didn't need him to fight his battles. He was doing just fine on his own. The first cohort started in June. 25 men and women, ages ranging from 22 to 53. Some had been out of prison for years, others for just months. All of them carried the weight of their pasts, the shame, the fear, the doubt that whispered they'd never be anything more than their worst mistakes. Malcolm attended the orientation. He stood at the front of the room, looking at faces that reminded him of people he'd grown up with. People who could have been him. "I'm not going to lie to you," Malcolm said. "This is going to be hard. The world doesn't want you to succeed. Society has written you off. You'll face discrimination, skepticism, and setbacks. But here's the truth. You are here because you deserve to be here. Not because I'm doing you a favor. Because you earned it. You survived something most people can't imagine. And if you can survive that, you can survive anything. He paused. So prove them wrong. Prove that second chances aren't just feel-good stories. Prove that people can change. And prove that companies like Arcadia can do the right thing and still win. The room was silent. Then, slowly, one person started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Malcolm looked at Jamal. Jamal was smiling, a real, genuine smile Malcolm hadn't seen in years. After the orientation, one of the participants approached Malcolm. Her name was Shanice. Mid-30s, 5-year sentence for drug possession. 2 kids she was fighting to get back. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I've applied to 73 jobs in the last year. Every single one rejected me the second they saw my record. You're the first person who didn't treat me like I'm broken." Malcolm's throat tightened. "You're not broken. The system is." Shanice wiped her eyes. "I'm gonna make you proud. I swear, you already have." Walking back to his office, Malcolm felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for once, he was using his power to build instead of just survive. But peace never lasts. That night, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Turner?" The voice was smooth, professional. Too professional. "Who is this?" "My name is Gordon Hayes. I represent a coalition of Arcadia shareholders. We'd like to have a conversation about the direction you're taking the company." Malcolm's stomach sank. "I'm listening. Not over the phone. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. my office. I'll send you the address." The line went dead. Malcolm stared at the phone. He knew what this was. The beginning of a war. And wars, Malcolm had learned, always got bloody before they got better. Gordon Hayes' office was exactly what Malcolm expected. Glass towers, leather furniture, abstract art that cost more than most people's houses. Hayes himself was a silver-haired white man in his 60s, tailored suit, shark eyes behind designer glasses. He didn't stand when Malcolm entered, just gestured to a chair. "Mr. Turner, thanks for coming." Malcolm sat. "Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Hayes smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I represent 12 shareholders who collectively own 80% of Arcadia Corp. We're concerned about recent decisions you've made. The Second Chance Initiative, among other things." Hayes opened the folder. "You've fired long-tenured executives. You've restructured departments without board approval. You've diverted capital from investor dividends to social programs. And now you're hiring convicted criminals. Formerly incarcerated individuals," Malcolm corrected. "Semantics." Hayes leaned forward. "Here's the reality. You're a janitor who got lucky. You don't have the experience, the education, or the judgment to run a $15 billion company. And your social justice crusade is tanking shareholder confidence." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Our stock price is up 12% since I took over. For now. But investors are skittish. One bad quarter, one PR disaster, and you're done. So here's my offer. Step down voluntarily. We'll position it as a mutual decision. You'll stay on as a board advisor. Keep your shares. Walk away with your dignity intact. We'll bring in someone qualified to actually run the company. And if I refuse," Hayes' smile widened, "then we initiate a vote of no confidence. We drag your every decision through the media. We expose every mistake, every questionable hire, every penny you've wasted on feel-good initiatives. We make you radioactive. And then we remove you anyway." Malcolm stood. "You done?" "Excuse me?" "I asked if you're done. Because I have a company to run." Hayes' expression darkened. You're making a mistake. No, Malcolm said, walking to the door. You are. You think I'm afraid of a fight? I grew up in D.C., Mr. Hayes. I survived things you can't imagine. You think a shareholder revolt scares me? You think bad press scares me? I've been counted out my entire life. And every single time, I've proven people like you wrong. He opened the door. So bring your vote, bring your media campaign, bring whatever you've got, because I'm not going anywhere. Malcolm walked out before Hayes could respond. The war began immediately. Within 48 hours, hit pieces started appearing. Forbes, Malcolm Turner's risky gamble. Is Arcadia heading for disaster? Bloomberg, investors flee as Arcadia CEO prioritizes politics over profits. Fox Business brought on a panel of experts to debate whether hiring formerly incarcerated workers was dangerous and irresponsible. Malcolm's approval rating among shareholders plummeted. His inbox flooded with angry messages. Board members called emergency meetings, but Malcolm didn't flinch. He doubled down. He went on CNBC and calmly dismantled the narrative. Let's talk numbers, he told the anchor. Since I became CEO, revenue is up 14%. Employee retention is up 22%. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. So when people say I'm prioritizing politics over profits, what they really mean is I'm not prioritizing their profits. I'm building a sustainable company that benefits everyone, employees, customers, communities, not just a handful of hedge fund managers. He went on podcasts, wrote op-eds, gave interviews. He didn't shy away from his past. He owned it. I was a janitor, he said on NPR. And that's exactly why I understand this company better than people who've spent their whole lives in boardrooms. I know what it's like to be invisible. I know what it's like to work your ass off and get nothing in return. And I refuse to build a company that treats people the way I was treated. The public response was mixed. Some loved him. Some hated him. But everyone was talking. And in the meantime, the Second Chance Initiative was working. Shanice completed her training and landed a full-time role in customer service. Within 3 months, she was promoted to team lead. Her kids moved back in with her. She sent Malcolm a photo. Her 2 daughters, standing in front of their new apartment. The caption read, "We made it." Marcus, a 40-year-old man who'd spent 15 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, became one of Arcadia's top software engineers. He'd built an app that streamlined internal communication, saving the company millions. The stories kept coming, and Malcolm made sure the world heard them. But Gordon Hayes wasn't done. 2 weeks before the shareholder vote, Hayes' coalition leaked a story. A former employee from the Second Chance Initiative had been arrested for shoplifting. The headlines were brutal. Arcadia's Second Chance program already failing. Malcolm Turner's experiment backfires, employee arrested. The media frenzy was immediate. Pundits demanded Malcolm shut down the program. Shareholders called for his resignation. Malcolm called an emergency press conference. He stood in front of a room full of reporters, cameras flashing, and spoke without notes. Yesterday, one of our employees made a mistake. He stole a candy bar from a convenience store. He was arrested, charged, and released. And yes, he's part of the Second Chance Initiative. He paused. Here's what the headlines won't tell you. That employee is a 24-year-old man named Darius. He spent 3 years in prison for selling weed, a substance that's now legal in half the country. He's been with us for 2 months. He's been doing great work. And yesterday, he had a panic attack, relapsed into old survival behaviors, and made a bad decision. Malcolm looked directly into the cameras. Does that mean the program is a failure? Does that mean Darius is irredeemable? Or does it mean he's human? Because I've seen executives embezzle millions and get golden parachutes. I've seen CEOs crash companies and walk away with bonuses. But a kid steals a candy bar, and suddenly it's proof that people like him don't deserve second chances. His voice hardened. We're keeping Darius. We're getting him the support he needs. And we're moving forward. Because this program was never about perfection. It was about humanity. And if you can't handle that, then you're not the kind of investor we want. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Malcolm walked off the stage. 2 days later, the shareholder vote took place. Malcolm stood in the boardroom, watching the numbers roll in. His heart pounded. His hands were steady. The vote was close. Too close. And then the final tally appeared. Malcolm Turner, 52% vote of no confidence. 48%. He'd won. Barely. But he'd won. Gordon Hayes stood, his face a mask of cold fury. This isn't over. Malcolm met his gaze. Yeah, it is. Hayes walked out. Several shareholders followed, but most stayed. Sandra Liu, the board chairwoman, approached Malcolm. You got lucky today. I know. Don't waste it. Malcolm nodded. I won't. You ever fought a battle where the odds were stacked against you and won by the skin of your teeth? Malcolm's victory is fragile. The wolves are still circling, and the hardest tests are yet to come. Comment below if you've ever had to fight for what you believe in, even when everyone said you'd lose. Winning the vote didn't feel like victory. Malcolm sat alone in his office that night, staring at the city lights below. 52%. 4 percentage points between success and humiliation. 4 percentage points between vindication and destruction. He'd won, but barely. And barely meant half his shareholders wanted him gone. His phone buzzed. A text from Jamal. You good? Malcolm typed back. Yeah, just tired. Come to lose. Got something to show you. Malcolm almost said no. He wanted to go home, collapse on his couch, sleep for a week. But something in Jamal's message pulled at him. 30 minutes later, he walked into the diner. Jamal was in their usual booth, but he wasn't alone. 6 people sat crammed around the table, all participants from the Second Chance Initiative. What's this? Malcolm asked. Jamal grinned. We heard about the vote. Figured you could use a reminder of why you're doing this. Shanna slid over, making room for Malcolm. Sit down, boss. Malcolm sat. His throat tightened. For the next hour, they talked. Not about work. Not about politics. Just life. Shanna showed pictures of her daughter's first day back at school. Marcus talked about reconnecting with his brother after 20 years. A woman named Tanya shared that she'd just gotten her own apartment. First time in her life, she'd had a place that was truly hers. We're not statistics, Tanya said, looking directly at Malcolm. We're not risks or liabilities or PR problems. We're people, and you're the first person in power who's treated us like that. So, don't you dare let them make you doubt yourself. Malcolm's eyes burned. He blinked hard. I'm not going anywhere. Good, Jamal said, because we're just getting started. They stayed until midnight, drinking terrible coffee and eating greasy fries, laughing about everything and nothing. And for the first time in weeks, Malcolm felt the weight lift, not disappear, but lighten, enough to breathe. When he finally left, Jamal walked him to his car. You know they're not going to stop, right? Jamal said. Hayes and his crew. They'll keep coming. I know. And you know this could all blow up in your face. One bad headline, one scandal, and everything you built falls apart. I know that too. Jamal studied him. Then why keep going? You've got money. You've got power. You could cash out, live like a king, and never worry about anything again. Why put yourself through this? Malcolm looked back at the diner, at the warm light spilling through the windows. Because if I don't, who will? Jamal nodded slowly. 8. Then let's make sure you survive long enough to finish what you started. The next morning, Malcolm implemented new protocols. Tighter security. vetted communications. He hired a crisis management team, not to hide the truth, but to make sure the truth got told before it could be twisted. He also made a risky move. He invited a journalist from The Atlantic to embed with Arcadia for 6 months. Full access. No restrictions. The article would publish regardless of what she found. His board thought he was insane. "You're giving a reporter carte blanche to destroy us?" Sandra Liu demanded. "I'm giving a reporter the chance to tell the real story," Malcolm countered. "Good, bad, ugly, all of it. Because I'm not afraid of transparency. If we're doing something wrong, I want to know. And if we're doing something right, the world should know too." The journalist, a woman named Rachel Kim, started the following week. She shadowed Malcolm, interviewed employees, sat in on meetings. She asked hard questions. Malcolm answered honestly. "Why did you really start the Second Chance initiative?" she asked one afternoon. Malcolm thought about lying, about giving her the polished, media-friendly answer. But he didn't. "Guilt," he said. Rachel's eyebrows rose. "Guilt? I got out. My best friend didn't. 1,000 other kids from my neighborhood didn't. And every day I sit in this office, I think about them, about how luck and circumstance made the difference between me being here and me being in prison. Or dead. So yeah, part of this is guilt. But it's also responsibility. I have power now, and I refuse to waste it." Rachel wrote that down. "Do you think one company can really change systemic inequality?" "No," Malcolm admitted. "But I think one company can prove it's possible to do things differently. And maybe that inspires 10 more companies. Then 100, then 1,000. I'm not naive enough to think I'm going to fix everything. But I'm stubborn enough to try." 6 months later, the article published. The headline: Malcolm Turner and the Business of Second Chances. Inside Arcadia Corp's radical experiment. It was honest. It highlighted successes, employees like Shanice and Marcus who were thriving. But it also documented failures. Darius's arrest. A participant who'd relapsed into drug use and had to be let go. The internal resistance from managers who didn't want to work with formerly incarcerated employees. But the overall tone was clear. This was hard, messy, imperfect work, and it was working. The article went viral. Within days, other companies started reaching out. "How do we start our own programs? Can you consult with us? Will you speak at our conference?" Malcolm said yes to some, no to others. He wasn't interested in being a guru or a celebrity. He just wanted to build. But the attention brought new challenges. Competitors started poaching his Second Chance initiative participants, offering higher salaries, better benefits. Malcolm couldn't match every offer. He lost 5 employees in 2 months. It stung. But it also proved something. These people were valuable. They could compete. And now other companies were starting to see it. Meanwhile, Gordon Hayes' coalition wasn't done. They started a whisper campaign, spreading rumors that Malcolm was using company funds for personal gain, that he was mentally unstable, that he was sleeping with employees. None of it was true. But rumors didn't need to be true to do damage. Malcolm's legal team shut down what they could. But fighting every lie was exhausting. Some days, Malcolm wanted to quit, to walk away, to let someone else carry the weight. But then he'd get an email. From Shanice, sharing that her daughter made honor roll. From Marcus, saying he'd just bought his first car. From Tanya, sending a photo of her new apartment, furnished and decorated, with a handwritten note. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." And Malcolm would remember why he was doing this. Not for shareholders. Not for headlines, for them. The crisis came on a Tuesday. Malcolm was in a meeting with his CFO when Kaisha burst through the door, phone in hand, face pale. "We have a problem." Malcolm's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "It's Darius. The kid who'd been arrested for shoplifting. The one Malcolm had defended publicly. The one he'd kept on despite the backlash. What about him? Keisha's voice shook. He's been accused of assault. By another employee. The room went silent. Malcolm stood. Tell me everything. The story came out in pieces. Darius had gotten into an altercation with a coworker, a guy named Brad, who'd apparently been harassing him for weeks, calling him a thug, making jokes about prison. Brad had escalated yesterday, shoving Darius during a break. Darius shoved back. Brad hit his head on a desk, ended up with a concussion. Now Brad was threatening to sue, and the media was already sniffing around. Malcolm felt the walls closing in. This was exactly what Hayes and his allies had been waiting for. Proof that the Second Chance Initiative was dangerous. That Malcolm's judgment was flawed. He could already see the headlines. Arcadia employee assaulted CEO's risky hire to blame. Where's Darius now? Malcolm asked. HR sent him home. They're recommending immediate termination. No. Keisha blinked. Malcolm? I said no. Not until I talked to him. Malcolm grabbed his keys and walked out, ignoring his CFO's protests. He found Darius at his apartment, that tiny studio in a rough neighborhood. Darius answered the door looking hollowed out, eyes red, hands shaking. I'm sorry, Darius said immediately. I'm so sorry. Tell me what happened. Darius sank onto his couch, head in his hands. Brad's been on me since day one, calling me names, saying I don't belong there, saying people like me always screw up. I ignored it. I swear I did. But yesterday he pushed me, and I snapped. I pushed him back. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop. Malcolm sat beside him. Did you file a complaint with HR? Twice. They said they'd look into it. Nothing ever happened. Malcolm's jaw clenched. Why didn't you come to me? Because you got enough problems. Because I didn't want to be another headline. Because I thought I could handle it. Darius looked up, tears streaming. I ruined everything, didn't I? The program, your reputation, everything. You didn't ruin anything, Malcolm said firmly. Brad's a bully. HR dropped the ball. And you defended yourself. That's not a crime. But they're gonna fire me. Not if I have anything to say about it. Malcolm stood. Stay here. Don't talk to anyone. I'll handle this. Back at Arcadia, Malcolm went straight to HR. The director, a woman named Patricia, looked uncomfortable when he walked in. Mr. Turner, I can explain. Did Darius file complaints about Brad? Well, yes, but did you investigate them? We were planning to, but with everything going on, so you ignored them. And now Darius is being blamed for defending himself against a hostile work environment that you allowed to continue. Patricia paled. That's exactly what happened. And here's what's going to happen next. You're going to reopen Darius's complaints. You're going to investigate Brad. And you're going to make sure every other employee in this company knows that harassment of any kind will not be tolerated. Am I clear? Yes, sir. Malcolm walked out and called an emergency board meeting. Sandra Liu looked exhausted when she joined the video call. Malcolm, please tell me you're not about to do something reckless. Define reckless. Defending an employee who assaulted someone. An employee who defended himself against ongoing harassment that HR failed to address, Malcolm corrected. And yes, I'm defending him. Because if we throw Darius under the bus to save face, we're admitting that the Second Chance Initiative was performative bullshit. We're admitting that the second someone from that program makes a mistake, even when that mistake was provoked, we'll sacrifice them to protect our image. That's not fair, another board member interjected. We have to consider liability. I'm considering humanity, Malcolm interrupted. Darius is a 24-year-old kid who's been trying like hell to turn his life around. He made a mistake. So did Brad. So did HR. but only one of them is facing termination, and it's the one with a record. Because he has a record. Someone shouted. Exactly, Malcolm said quietly. Because he has a record. Because society has decided that people like him don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. That they don't deserve second chances or third or fourth. That one mistake erases all the progress they've made. Well, I'm not doing that. Not in my company. Sandra sighed. Malcolm, I admire your principles, but this is going to cost us. Investors will panic. Customers will complain. The media will crucify you. Let them. You could lose your job. Then I lose you doing the right thing. The board voted. It was close. But Malcolm got his way. Darius was suspended pending investigation, not fired. Brad was also suspended. And HR was ordered to implement mandatory anti-harassment training company-wide. The backlash was immediate. Conservative media exploded. CEO protects violent criminal over law-abiding employee. Liberal outlets were divided. Malcolm Turner's noble stand or misguided loyalty. Arcadia's stock dropped 6% in one day. Malcolm got death threats. His security team increased his protection. He stopped sleeping. But he didn't back down. And then, 3 days later, something unexpected happened. 15 Arcadia employees, all from different departments, different backgrounds, published an open letter. We stand with Darius. We stand with Malcolm. The letter detailed Brad's history of harassment, not just toward Darius, but toward others, women, people of color, LGBTQ employees. All of it documented. All of it ignored by HR. The letter went viral. Within 24 hours, over 1,000 employees had signed it. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a violent ex-convict. It was about a toxic workplace culture. About systemic failures. About a CEO who was willing to risk everything to protect his people. Malcolm sat in his office, reading the letter for the 10th time when Darius called. I don't know what to say, Darius whispered. You don't have to say anything, Malcolm replied. Just keep showing up. Keep proving them wrong. I will. I swear. When Malcolm hung up, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. He was exhausted, battered, barely holding on, but he was still standing. Ever stood up for someone when everyone else wanted you to walk away? Malcolm's learning that doing the right thing doesn't make you popular, it makes you a target. Drop a comment if you've ever had to choose between your principles and your peace. 1 year later, Malcolm stood on stage at Arcadia's annual conference, looking out at 10,000 employees. The same building where he'd once mopped floors. The same people who'd once ignored him. Now they were on their feet, applauding. The Second Chance initiative had grown. 250 participants across 12 cities. An 84% retention rate. Partnerships with 20 other companies who'd launched similar programs. Darius was in the audience. So was Shanice, Marcus, Tanya. Jamal sat in the front row, arms crossed, smiling. Malcolm gripped the podium. A year ago, a lot of people told me this wouldn't work. They said I was naive, reckless, that I'd destroy everything I'd built. He paused. They were almost right. A ripple of laughter. This year was hard. We made mistakes. We faced backlash. We lost battles. But we won the war. Not because we were perfect, but because we refused to quit. Because we believed that people deserve more than their worst moments. That redemption isn't a fantasy. It's a choice. He looked at Jamal. My best friend once told me that success isn't about escaping your past. It's about bringing people with you. I didn't understand that at first, but I do now. Malcolm's voice grew stronger. Arcadia isn't just a company anymore. It's proof. Proof that capitalism doesn't have to be cool. Proof that profit and purpose can coexist. Proof that when you invest in people, all people, everyone wins. He stepped back from the podium. Thank you for believing. Thank you for fighting. And thank you for showing the world what's possible when we choose humanity over fear. The applause was deafening. That night, Malcolm sat in Lou's diner with Jamal. Same booth, same terrible coffee. You did it, Jamal said. We did it. Jamal shook his head. Nah, man, this was you. I just helped. You did more than help. You saved this. You saved me. Jamal looked away, uncomfortable with the emotion. So what now? You gonna run for president or some shit? Malcolm laughed. Hell no. I'm gonna keep doing this. Building. Growing. Making sure the door stays open for the next person who needs a shot. You think it'll last? All this? I don't know, Malcolm admitted. Maybe the next CEO will kill the program. Maybe the board will force me out eventually. But it won't matter, because we proved it's possible. And once people see what's possible, they can't unsee it. Jamal raised his coffee cup. To second chances. Malcolm clinked his cup against Jamal's. To second chances. 3 months later, Malcolm received a letter. It was from a kid in Detroit, 16 years old. Just got out of juvie. He'd read about Malcolm's story and wanted to know if there was hope for him too. Malcolm wrote back immediately. Not a form letter, a real response with his personal email. An invitation to call. A promise that he'd help however he could, because that's what this was always about. Not glory. Not headlines. Not proving he was the smartest guy in the room. It was about being the person he wished had existed when he was scrubbing floors and dreaming of something more. Malcolm Turner had been a janitor, a day trader, a CEO. But more than any title, he was a man who'd learned that power without purpose was just noise, and legacy wasn't what you built. It was who you lifted. If Malcolm's story moved you, if it reminded you that second chances matter, if it made you believe that one person can make a difference, follow for more stories that challenge, inspire, and prove that the underdog doesn't just survive. They win. Subscribe, because the next story might be the one that changes everything for you. And remember, you don't need permission to rise. You just need the courage to start.